Thanks for joining us this afternoon for our first LinkedIn Live. Growing your business is about more than simply increasing sales. And if you've gone to the trouble of taking on people, premises, and investing your own time and energy, you'll also want to improve profits. So today I'm joined by Graham Potts, who's a chartered accountant and our managing director at Wessex Commercial. Graham is a whiz with numbers. He's got years of experience buying, selling, and growing businesses. And he's a great person to spot the changes that businesses need to make. So the question that we're asking today is, are profits sliding while sales grow? Graham, we assume that when sales are increasing, profits are too, but you're saying that that's not always the case.
Yeah, thanks, Linda, and welcome everybody. I think that was a polite way of saying I'm a bit of a oldie, but anyway, so lots of experience. Yes, in our experience, at low sales volumes, business owners generally are in control of the business. They've got a good feel. However, as the sales increase and as you take on staff and more staff, that feel starts to go. And basically, obviously, staff brings its own problems. But what happens is that we've seen many times that sales at a certain level, and it's sort of at different levels for different types of business, but as sales grow, profits start to drop. And often business owners don't understand why. And there's more than one reason, and it could be a number of reasons. But the general feeling is, well, sales grow, so profits should. But what do you do if they're not increasing? We have found that often the accounts, that's internal accounts I'm talking about, not your year end, but your internal systems, small businesses, whether it's Free Agent, QuickBooks, Sage, even Xero, if it's not set up right, what we find is that you don't get the right analysis or breakdown. So you don't understand exactly where the sales are against the cost of sales. For example, say you're selling, all accountants talk about widgets. I'm going to talk widgets and planks. You need to know what cost of each widget or each plank is. And then that is inclusive of everything. That's not just the cost to bring it in. Have you changed it? Have you made that widget, or that plank was a piece of timber that you turned into a pole, for instance? So it's materials, labor, consumables, transport, etc. And it's the cost of the labor against it. You need to have that information.
Graham, if businesses are experiencing that situation where profits aren't growing in line with their business growth, what does that look like in any given business?
But as I said, every business is different, and the problems are different. But actually, they come down to most of the time to the same sort of things. So I'll give an example. Probably it's better to have an example. We had a client who was very stressed, working very long hours, and I imagine a lot of people are, especially in today's environment, understand what I'm saying, but didn't understand why they weren't more profitable, because the volumes had increased massively over the years. It was starting to affect the business owner's home life. It was it was a he. His wife actually was at home and she was ill, so he couldn't concentrate on the business at times, but also he couldn't concentrate on the family. And because he was working long hours, with the endless problems that was happening, did he have enough cash to pay staff? And then he was guilty about what was happening with his wife, etc. He was sort of in a downward spiral.
So that's a difficult situation to be in. How do you address the business side of things? How do you take the pressure off on that from that perspective?
Well, what you generally look, again, I'm going back to the accounting systems. First of all, we looked at breaking the profit and loss account down into more manageable groups. I call them chunking. You have to chunk the information, because often you either have no information or too much information. and you have to try and put them into more manageable chunks. We talked to the owner and asked about the best way to do this and what sort of things, what's the best chunks for him. I'll give you an example. It could be if you're a business, you can have different locations, you can have different customer groups, you could have different products, different services, contracts, you could have different contracts. So we wanted to look where the margins might be different, where you had sort of a little bit where you could actually split the business. What we decided in this particular case, we split it into different markets. So they had a different type of market. So we analysed the data and proved that the highest level of sales value produced the lowest margin. So they had other sales, lower sales value, higher margin. What was interesting was when they were actually pricing, the markup was reasonably similar. In fact, market one had the most margin or markup. That markup and margin is another. They're different things, but they're related. But that's another story, which we can cover at another time. But this was funny because actually the margin was eroded by so much. I mean, literally, we're talking about a margin when they had put, in excess of 50% on the price of what they thought the cost was. It was far exceeded that. When they got down to the profit and loss, once we broke it down, it was less than what was into single figures. And then when you took on the overhead and everything, they were losing money on this. So we looked into it further and sort of investigated this market. And we found that this poor performing market was mainly due to the type of businesses they were dealing with. They were more aggressive customers. They had problems with delivery. They had problems with quality. And they were served by, let's call it, less engaged staff. And the management didn't have the right training or resource to actually, for that particular market, to deal with it. So the client decided to stop dealing with a number of these. We analysed the customers further, and a fair proportion, we just said that you're never going to make money on these because they're always going to be demanding. How can I say it? They were demanding things instantly. Oh, I think my camera's gone. Hang on a minute. Sorry about this.
While you get your camera back, Graham, interesting there that this particular client thought that they were going to.
I'm back in the room. Sorry.
They obviously thought that they should have been making the same profits on all of their sales because they were pricing in the same way. So I think it's an interesting point that what you think is going to happen isn't always borne out in the data and in the results.
I think that in this case, they thought they may make less margin because they knew they had a few problems. But when we actually analysed it in detail, the problems were far worse than they thought.
Yeah.
They're saying it's like the customers were demanding. It was like it was always the problem for our client.
Yeah.
It was never their fault. And they would go there and then to do something because it was a manufacturer install sort of situation. And when they went to install, the client wasn't ready, didn't want to pay for it. And it was having the processes around it to actually deal with it. And when we talked to the owner, it was like, it was just too many things we had to put right. And it was like, is this really the right thing? So we cut those customer groups that were unfavorable to the client.
And what was the impact of doing that, Graham?
Well, it was interesting because obviously this took a while. It took a while to bring up, to go through to stop that type of work. You can't suddenly just cut it. You had to, complete, look at the contracts. Could you go out of them? Renegotiate. Where do you stand on that? Also, with the labour force, some were moved elsewhere, retained. So it took about a year to settle down. But after a year, sales were down about 10%, but profits had more than doubled. The bottom line had more than doubled for less work.
That's crazy, isn't it? It's a really big impact. How did that client feel having made that change?
Obviously, quite happy. Was feeling much better, felt more in control of the business. felt less guilty, had been feeling really guilty, especially with his wife, was able to spend more time with the family. He could actually change his work-life balance around, so reducing his hours, not drastically, but enough to actually be in control of the business, but still have time for family and can move things around. And he just felt relieved. He had cash in the business as well. So when we first got talking, he was looking at getting additional finance, but he stopped looking at that for the time being. And then by the time we, sort of a year and a half came after that, he realized he had surplus cash in the business, and he's had surplus cash since and kept it that way to be more of a lifestyle business. So he feels he's got more time for the family, etc.
Yep. So there's some big changes and obviously had a big impact. What would your advice be to businesses that are struggling with high turnover, growing turnover, but low profits?
Well, obviously there's quite a few things to look at. The problem to start with is, have you got time? You've got to make time. Most people in this, or businesses in this position, haven't got time, but you've got to make time. You've got to make time to understand your numbers. Yeah. That is key to any business, especially as you grow. You see it so many times. How many people watch Dragon's Den, whether you like it or don't like it or whatever you feel about it, you have to know your numbers. And if you don't know someone, then find someone who can help you to understand those numbers.
Yeah.
You don't have to be an accountant to understand your numbers, not in this day and age. Accountants would like you to think that way, but no, you've got to have a feel for your business. So I do also, the next thing I'd say, you need to trust your accounting system.
Yep.
So the accounting system is, we use Xero. Everybody who knows me, we just love it. It's a system for business owners. It's not a system for accountants. It's a system there to help you run your business. But you need to trust your system. The number of times we go in and we see business owners and managers not believing the numbers that come out of that system. So they run side spreadsheets. I basically, in this example, we went in and they were running 3 spreadsheets to get the same information, and all 3 came up with different answers. So, and we don't, obviously, spreadsheets are okay, but as they get bigger, they get unwieldy, and actually they are very error prone.
Yeah.
So we obviously recommend using a cloud accounts based system like Xero. There are others. But in the past, when you had a system and you grew, and I've been in this position with growing companies, especially when I was in corporate, you had to keep on changing. You grow out of a band, you have to change the account system. You don't have to do that with Xero. You can maximize Xero, and then you can look at adding apps. So look at your account system and make sure you can basically trust it.
Yeah.
Thirdly, I'd say you need to make sure that all your team actually know how to use that system. There are so many people I've gone in that actually, the old days, people knew Sage, accountants knew Sage forever. They've gone into Xero. It's different. The old systems were batch. You could do it at certain times, once a week, once a month. It's instant now. You can be. These are real-time systems. So you set up processes. You don't have to be every second, but you basically have a position where you actually send information quite regularly, not at the end of the month or the end of the quarter.
Yeah, you don't sit on it, do you? You just fire it off as and when you get it. Yeah.
And then these systems, if they're set up properly, have all that information on there, so you always have the information to go back and interrogate.
Yeah.
So you need help around you with people, accountants that know how to break these. Well, set the systems up properly, and that includes training and regular support, not just putting you on there. You've got to have that regular understanding, etc. And then you need that training and regular support, because we all know training, basically, one set of training doesn't teach you. You need training and you need support. So as training comes down, your knowledge goes up. Sorry if you can see my hands. I talk a lot like that. Then you can look at the business numbers as, with confidence, and you can use it. You can get on anywhere in the world as long as you've got an internet connection. So I would say, in summary, business is all about making tweaks to your business, because little tweaks suddenly become a massive compound effect on those and give you much better results at the end of it. Having a system that you run properly gives you the tools to make the right decisions. And if you've got an accountant on board, those decisions you can, like, for instance, clients can ring us up, we can go on the account, see where they are, and then we can advise because we're up to date with that information. We're not waiting a year later, where, businesses change so much. You've had COVID, you've had Brexit, you've had, problems like that. Now we've got the Ukrainian war. It's constant. Changes are constant in business. So business owners need to be ahead of the game now. So it really depends on what you want. But if you've got the right management information and the right help and support and getting the right numbers out, you can actually make the right decisions to achieve your goals.
I think you've told a kind of cautionary tale there, though, that what you're pricing at might not be happening in your business, and there is just no guarantee that sales growth will equal growth and profit. So I think if that resonates with anyone who's watching today, and you want to have a one-to-one conversation with Graham, have a look at the numbers with him. The email address is on the screen. Chat with Graham at wessexcommercial.com. Pop Graham over an email, and he can set up a time for you to have that conversation. Next time, we are going to be asking, are you holding back on growth because the numbers don't look worth it? So I'm looking forward to that conversation. Thank you very much for joining us on our live today, and we're looking forward to joining you again in a month's time. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, everybody. Bye.